Infinius VM is the first hardware accelerated chain that's capable of achieving 1 million TPS. It's also the first chain capable of achieving 1 million TPS. To put that TPS in perspective, that's like 100x monad, which is parallel EVM, what it is capable of achieving. So that's sort of the comparison and to put things into perspective.
None of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by WAGMI Ventures or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. What's up, everyone? Benga here with WAGMI Ventures podcast. On today's episode, we have a return guest, Jason Lai, co-founder of Solayer Labs, builder of native Solana restaking network, Solayer. You might ask, why is Jason back in season 2 of the podcast? Well, stick around and we'll dig into what Solayer Labs has been cooking on this episode with Jason. For anyone who is new, this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting builders and founders across crypto and AI. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. As always, appreciate you folks joining and listening in. Let's chop it up with Jason. Hey, dude. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Benga. Hi, everyone. It's great to be back.
Awesome. For the benefit of folks who may have not listened to our last episode with you, can you introduce yourself and share your crypto journey?
Yes. So it's Jason here. I graduated from Berkeley a couple of years ago. I actually first started my entrepreneurial experience with building a social app. So that grew pretty well to 500,000 users, but didn't really find a way to monetize it. During my time at Berkeley, I also joined a couple research labs, mostly on GPU training. So my work was very much around how do you accelerate model parallel, data parallel across large training clusters with a better scheduling algorithm, which we called TikTok scheduling algorithm. After that, did sort of a lot of research into multi-party computation. I had a patent on efficient hardened derivation in multi-party computation setting, from which we built a company called MPC Vault, still running. It's one of the largest team custody multi-sig solutions on chain today, supporting over $5 to $10 billion in weekly transfer volume on chain. And now Solayer, which I co-founded just at the start of last year with Rachel.
Yes, know Solayer well, and just interesting to hear that you had first dibs on the TikTok name before it became named mainstream today. But yeah, we had you on the last episode talk about Solayer. And before we dive into why we have you back on the show today, it'd be nice to hear what you guys have done with Solayer in the last 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we got started, we were heads down on restaking, but we didn't want to follow the eigenlayer path. We want to build something that's more organic, right? In the world of crypto, a lot of people are doing asset wrapping with points, but we don't think that's organic. By organic, we mean that if the points incentive system stop and go away, which they will at some point in time, the system would have be bootstrapped to be in an organic state to still attract the capital, to generate fees or generate yields without inflated anticipation because of the token drop or something like that. So that's what motivated us to veer away from the eigenlayer path. And our restaking, we have two parts of it, which is endogenous restaking and exogenous restaking. For endogenous restaking, it's actually a liquid staking solution with a much higher yield because we do validator optimization. At the highest during the Trump sort of a trade time, it was like 19% APY. So it was a crazy number to see. And we also have the exogenous part. By the way, the endogenous part are used by exchanges to power their SO, used by other networks like Sonic to power their own liquid staking solutions. And there's a thing called super liquidity loop, where all the assets that are based on SO, Solayer SO, can actually be traded with each other with zero slippage. And that means that all the liquidity pool are actually shared. So even if you hold BitGet SO or Sonic SO and you add it to the liquidity pool and somebody wants to trade SO or somebody wants to trade another SO that we support, they actually share the same liquidity pool. And therefore, there's more fees for everyone. And we also do, as I said, validator level optimization. That's why the yield is so high. And that's like organically attracting lots of deposits today. At the highest, we're like over 500 million, 600 million, 700 million TVL. Now, the second part is exogenous AVS, which is shared security. Eigenlayer structured it as a marketplace. Of course, they also has this DA piece, but we don't think structuring it as a marketplace is a good start, primarily because we think the industry will take some time to price security, and that itself is going to take some time to mature. And therefore, we've chosen another approach, an opportunity that we have identified when we were working on node optimization, because the primary objective of working on node optimization for Solana is to get higher yield. How do we get higher yield? Building larger blocks, having a different and better scheduling algorithm for the transactions, so we can stuff more profitable transactions in for the validator, which is us, and then it's passed back to the end user, which are passed back to the end users. So we identify this opportunity to accelerate at a much larger scale with hardware, and that therefore Infini SVM as the next chapter for Solayer.
Well, we're going to come back right to that. We're not going to keep the audience waiting here, but I'm going to get them, rather encourage them to listen to episode 121, where you go into details of endogenous and exogenous staking on the Solayer platform. But you've already started going into it, so I'm going to just let you continue and talk about what has gotten CT and the broader crypto community excited about what you discovered during your journey building Solayer and how that is transitioning on to Infini SVM.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next chapter for Solayer is very much marked by a product that we're working on, which is called Infini SVM. It's a hardware accelerated SVM chain that's capable of processing 1 million TPS per second, right? So let me identify what the problem is, and I'll talk about how scalable the chain itself is and why it's very different. During the Trump trade, if you were actually trading meme coins in the past, I'm just using meme coins as an example, right? All the other transactions do have the same problem, but meme coin is probably what everyone is doing given the data on chain being predominated. Meme coins predominate all the transactions for Solana. So when you trade, like you click on the button, you buy or sell, most of the time, if the network becomes congested, it wouldn't give you high fees like you see on Ethereum. It's like $60, $70. On Solana, it's like when you click on the button, it doesn't really respond to you, the app. So it keeps you waiting, right? It says it's processing. And then after 1 minute or so, you'll notice that, the transaction has failed, as opposed to transaction succeeded. And you will have to wait a minute to find that out. Or the transaction failed because the price has moved or something to that effect. So it's very hard to get a trade through. And that's a problem that I don't think, that's a problem for developers when they think about how to build their apps, because the goal for their app is to allow people to trade. And if the trading is happening on chain, people would want to have a very fast platform for that trade to be hosted and happen. And if you look at this TPS for Solana, the live TPS, the highest ever recorded, it's about 7,000 to 8,000 transactions per second, excluding the vote consensus transactions and data passing and etc. So it's just about 7,000 transactions. And that is not good enough if people are actually trading, let alone combining all the other things that are happening on chain. So therefore, we think there is a good and big opportunity to have SVM, a scalability solution. And we're also designing it in a very transparent way so that you don't have the same bridging experience and etc., which I can talk about later. But in summary, Infini SVM is the first hardware accelerated chain that's capable of achieving 1 million TPS. It's also the first chain capable of achieving 1 million TPS. To put that TPS in perspective, that's like 100x monad, which is parallel EVM, what it is capable of achieving. So that the comparison and to put things into perspective.
Wow, this is truly fascinating and revolutionary. I mean, I guess the first obvious question, is it an L1 or L2 for Solana?
Yeah, absolutely. So before answering that, I want to touch on what's the difference between L1 and L2, right? So the technical difference is that if there's a reorg, meaning reorganization of blocks on L1, the L2 state would be impacted. So that's very much the technical definition of L1 and L2. So in this case, Solayer Infini SVM, because it has its own voting quorum and its own state progression, you will be L1 and L1 eventually, but we probably will start as an L2. And that way, it's much easier to establish the proof and the trust assumptions to have a more higher safety guarantees, greater safety guarantees when the stake has not been distributed enough as an L1 network. Because if you start as an L1 network, what happens is there are only a couple people or it's like running the chain for you. And that's not very safe from an L1 perspective.
Got it. Wow. So you talked about the high throughput, near zero latency, and the tech being powered by InfiniBand technology, SDN, RDMA. I read from your light paper, and a multi-executor model. They're all very new blockchain technology terms. Can you break it down? And let's start at the throughput because you're promising or saying you're seeing speeds of up to 1 million transactions per second, 100 gigabits bandwidth. How are you able to achieve this?
So let's first break down the math part of why there's 100 gigabits of bandwidth required. We have 1 million transactions per second multiplied by 1 kilobyte, which is the assumed transaction size on Solana, just taking Solana as an example, per transaction. Then you would arrive at 10 gigabytes per second, which is 100 gigabits per second if you use the conversion rate of 10. So that gives you why the bandwidth is very much needed. And most of the blockchain nodes hosted validating blockchains are not nowhere near that. The consumer internet is only able to support 1 gigabits at the very most. If you want to have all the nodes running across different parts of the world, by anyone who is able to run node, they'll be able to just use any internet to run that. That's not gonna give the 1 million TPS just from a math and a physics perspective. So everything has to be re-engineered. How are we able to achieve this is because that we just employ data center networking. All the nodes are directly hosted for validating nodes. They're directly hosted by labs entity at the very start. We're going to have other people host it in the future, but then we'll have that. But we always have dedicated networking, data center grade networking set up to make sure that we can meet the bandwidth requirement. And for verifier network, which is the decentralized, more larger with larger numbers of people participating, they're verifying the state of the chain transition. Those can be run on smaller networks and smaller hardware. So that's the goal here.
Got it. And then the other piece of near zero latency, the InfiniBand technology, SDN, RDM. If you could just give us high level what that all means and how it ties back into how this technology is delivered.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me talk about near zero latency. So when the transaction gets confirmed, that means two things, right? So it first gets included and validated by the blockchain. So that's a throughput question. If your chain is operating at a very high speed, your chain can take in a lot of transactions at the same time. And if that is the case, when I send a transaction in, you'll get included. And that's the first part to the end user latency, like basically how they feel about the latency. And the second part of that is, will the chain state revert after that's included, after I know it's included? So for InfiniSVM, the reorg possibility is actually very low because we employ a mega leader structure, and there isn't really this back and forth across different leaders. And there's always the data packets loss, voting not really going there in time, therefore that block is not confirmed type of question. So it's almost like an L2 sequencer pre-confirmation, but only that the pre-confirmation is also supplemented and augmented by a group of people who are voting on the chain state. So just in summary, because the chain is very fast, therefore the latency to the end user is low. And the second thing is that because the confirmation mechanism is still mega sequencer pre-confirmation model, and therefore just like every other L2's experience that you have with EVM, like if you make a transaction on Arbitrum, the confirmation is actually pretty fast.
Wow. Hey everybody, quick thing here. We're excited to announce WAGMI Advisory, your home for all things fundraising, hiring, and partnerships. This is all about supercharging your project with the WAGMI network, consisting of over 20,000 executives, investors, and builders in crypto, all ready to come alongside your project to help it succeed. Get in touch at team@wagmiventures.io to learn more and figure out if WAGMI Advisory is the right fit for your project. Let's get back to the show. We've talked about all the bells, all the whistles, and why this is truly fascinating and tech. I mean, 7,000 TPS from Solana to 1 million on InfiniVM here is pretty revolutionary. I want to tie it back to how this is a value prop to developers and consequently users. I mean, the first thing right off the bat is speed. But, how else would you position what InfiniVM is bringing to the market here?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a developer, and I have been a developer developing different kinds of apps, right? I have consumer web, consumer chatting apps way back in college. I think my value proposition or what I'm really looking for is really product market fit. And by that, I mean, I need to address the needs of the user segment I'm building for. And I don't really care, to be honest, which chain I'm building on. And eventually, all the different chains are going to be like public cloud, Amazon Web Services, Google Web Services, or Azure Web Services, but more in a decentralized fashion with a token. And that's the end picture. There's actually no sort of other benefits that, I mean, there are benefits when it comes to how the chain is structured, which is where SVM, the semantics of the transaction, which is SVM also has an upper hand. It's like you were on Windows and now you're on Mac. And therefore, I think choosing SVM as the operating system, let's put it that way, is very important. But then when it comes down to the chain, people actually don't care as much as long as they are able to address the end needs of the user, right? And if you look at the end needs of the user from a product perspective, the chain has to be cheap. And by that definition, because it's cheap, it has to be having high throughput. It's just, the two go hand in hand because it's a demand supply question. And the second thing is they has to be fast. So whenever I build the app, the user interacts with the app, the user gets instant response. So that's the characteristics that the developers are looking for. And a third thing is that what are the ecosystem effects? What do I need to do in order to get interact with the other protocols on chain, right? And so same thing there. If the chain has more throughput, there are going to be more apps, more liquidity, and therefore the ecosystem point is also going to be going in the favor of Infinity SVM, which is a much larger and higher throughput chain. So from a developer perspective, it's more like product market fit. And then if you want to have a great product for your market, you got to choose the infrastructure that's able to have much higher throughput than Solana can support today. Given that, and this is especially when there is a growing demand for Solana, so we can only anticipate that the congestion issue to get worse off as time goes by.
Gotcha. Actually, just on throughput and processing speeds, do you think there's an oversupply of TPS? How is higher TPS still relevant today, as there have been many debates questioning if crypto infrastructure has already surpassed demand?
Yeah, people might think there's an oversupply of TPS because a lot of Ethereum LTUs are not getting used as much. But TPS is not additive. So when you have two different states that don't really talk to each other, you can't really say that the total TPS is the sum of the two if you were to process a certain workload. Just like on Solana, for example, right? The meme coin trades are happening on Solana. Solana is still congested. There is no L2 that could ever help with that. So there's clear demand and there isn't really a solution. And so TPS is only valuable when it's on the same state. If it's on different states, it does not really contribute any value. So it's not really an additive question. It's more like how fast can you get it to be on a single state? And therefore, our Infinity SVM itself would be a very good solution because itself is able to achieve 1 million TPS. And now to understand this from another perspective, right? Think about a chat app. If a chat app has low TPS, so I can only chat with you like two people, and I have to chat with other people on a separate chain, let's say other state. By that, we mean other state. So that is not the experience that people want. People want to have all the chatting, Facebook Messenger, take it for example. I want to have it on the same platform. I chat with everyone I know, and therefore you need much higher TPS for that single state. And it doesn't matter if there's another app because people are not going to use it. Like nobody's going to use it. That's the state of Ethereum L2s. But you do need this super scalable chatting channel where you can interact with everyone. The second thing I want to mention is that the demand has to exist for whatever the TPS is, right? And the truth is the Ethereum EVM machine is not really getting as much demand right now. And there are a couple reasons for it. So on Solana, if you have ever traded on Solana, you'll notice that if you want to buy a token, it's one click. Whereas if you want to buy anything or transact anything on Ethereum, you have two steps. So you have to interact, sign something, interact with the website again, and then sign another thing. For example, you have to first approve and then trade and wait for the trade to complete and also wait for the first approve to go through. And if you want to supply liquidity, you also have to first approve and then supply liquidity. Whereas on SVM, it's just a single transaction. So that also highlights where the demand, like why the demand for SVM specific TPS is rising as compared to EVM TPSs, and that's the reason why EVMs are not getting used as much.
Got it. As a developer, why would I choose Solayer Infinity SVM over Solana or ZetaMarket's ZX? And maybe even potentially, and maybe this is not the right parallel, but Austin Federa's 00.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe let me explain the characteristics of Infinity SVM here in terms of how it scales Solana. So Solana itself is a sovereign chain, and Infinity SVM actually has a few nice properties in terms of developer adoption. So if you compare it with Ethereum L2s, the users first have to be where users first have to go through a bridge themselves before interacting with the app that's deployed on the L2. And the users also have to switch the network endpoint to another endpoint in order for everything to work. And none of that would be necessary with Infinity SVM. So if today you're already building on Solana, if you want to make use of Infinity SVM to make your app experience much better, what you do is they import an SDK that's written by us, Infinity SVM SDK, and you just put it in there. And what the SDK will do is that would offload the user transaction to Infinity SVM directly. So if you're building Pump.fun or any other launchpad, if you have the SDK, your app will just run super fast. When user click on trade, buy or sell, they will get instantly confirmed. And what's making that happen is that like what's happening under the hood is there's going to be a bridge transaction that's going to be confirmed very fast. It's also going to be accelerated by Solayer's transaction endpoint, acceleration endpoint, and that moves the asset to a locked position. You can call it a bridge, like moves the asset over a bridge. And in the same instruction or transaction that you sign, there is also another instruction that authorizes the asset movement on Infinity SVM. And so effectively, you're asking user to sign still one transaction, but it actually authorized the bridging transaction instruction, and also authorized the transaction that you wanted to happen on Infinity SVM just with one signature from the user. So that's the difference. That's the experience we're trying to create to scale Solana. And now back to your question of how this is different from 00. I think you mentioned another name, which I forgot, but we can get there. We can get to there. 00 is a network of POPs, like points of presence, between points of presences. So what that means is that you can see them as a private lanes with fast throughput, but they only address the network layer. So theoretically, Solayer can also make use of 00's network to make sure our broadcast of the chain state has low jitter and much higher guarantee of delivery as opposed to over the public internet, like doing over the public internet. So that's what 00 is trying to do. It's trying to provide a better internet infrastructure, which is very much needed if we want anything to go at a very high speed. And there are lots of optimizations that you can do once you're moving onto a dedicated lane. For example, there's a thing called jumbo frame. When you transmit, data is actually chopped into parts. And then if you make each part larger, of course, you're able to transmit much more throughput with a single sort of thread or single connection. And so we call it jumbo frame. But jumbo frames are not supported on public internet. But when you have a proprietary high-speed interconnect between different nodes, you can actually support jumbo frame, which would make data transmission go at a much higher rate as well. Oh, I think the other one you mentioned is ZetaMarkets.
ZetaMarkets, yes.
Yeah, ZetaMarkets has a very specific ZK rollup design. It does not necessarily support all SVM transactions. Like they're not trying to build a world computer that's powered by SVM. What they were trying to do is to have a specific rollup that's ZK based for perps settlement. So that's a very use case specific rollup. It's not a general purpose. It's not even like a general purpose rollup as you see in the relationship between Arbitrum and Ethereum.
Interesting. Wow. I guess they're all pretty distinct in their approach to how they scale. And it's interesting to know that ZetaMarkets is not able to process all transactions, maybe because of the ZK Zinc architecture piece that it's built on. So in your actually, do you have a testnet and are you getting developer feedback on it already?
Well, we do. We have we call it internal developer net, but it's actually opened to public access as well. We call it internal net just because we want to manage people's expectation. We're like sending a lot of transactions over there ourselves because we're building apps on the chain just to test the various kinds of apps. Just want to make sure that the TPS is there. So far, everything looks great. We'll also purge the chain state from time to time, but anyone can call the endpoint or RPC endpoint to test the limits.
And what has the feedback been so far from the folks who are already accessing it?
It's pretty good. So the throughput is much higher. Confirmation time is almost instant. Of course, there's still network latency to consider. And the next phase for us is to open it up to more folks to actively get them in and then to ask them to even spam us so that we know where the limits lie. But even with internal testing, the chain itself can reach 1 million TPS.
It's awesome. And what has been the biggest challenge architecting Infinity SVM, and what further challenges do you anticipate lie ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So Infinity SVM, as we previously said, is a hardware accelerated piece of blockchain. And so we're not just trying to get the software to work, which we have spread the software onto multiple machines. So usually blockchains only run on a single node, but this time with Infinity SVM, have to spread it across multiple machines interconnected with high-speed networks such as Infinity Band, which is acquired or by NVIDIA. So there's a lot of moving pieces. Most people who are building blockchains only have to get the software part to work, but we also have the hardware piece of it. So sometimes we have to make data center trips to make sure that we have the latest hardware installed, making sure that the hardware is also configured correctly, setting up redundancy, thinking about geo-replication and geo-redundancy. So that is very much different from building a software-only app or a blockchain. And that's also the exciting part about it and the secret sauce of why we're able to push much higher TPS. And the other really excited part about Infinity SVM is that we're actually decentralizing the trust by having each player verifying only part of the chain as opposed to the full chain state. And there's also mega sequencer model, which means that I think it's the first to be seen for layer one networks. I might be wrong, but that would give you almost instant confirmation if you rely on sequencer pre-confirmations.
Yeah, I think Infinity SVM is already breaking many rules and being the first in many ways. This is really exciting stuff. I was going to ask what else is on your roadmap that you guys are building as you launch the new chain, and if there's anything exciting or noteworthy that we should be expecting.
Yeah, the chain itself is definitely the most exciting part. I myself is testing the chain every day now. I think it's very cool to see a chain running at a very high speed and much, much higher than anyone else have ever, like basically no one else has ever seen this speed in public blockchains. So I'm very excited for that. We also have other product rollouts. It's a very small team, but we do lots of things here. So to test the capability, because the future, we want the chain to be the foundation for the future of finance. So we also have debit cards that are powered by the network. So right now we're rolling out crypto debit cards, and that would be able to, we can launch that very soon in the next couple of weeks. That would allow people to spend their USDC directly through the Visa network for anyone around the globe. Yeah, the settlement system will be supported by Infinity SVM.
Oh, the settlement system.
But because of the bridge and then the transparent bridging design, so if you have, as long as you have assets on Solana, we're able to take that asset in. So for example, if you have USDC on Solana, you just have to use your Phantom wallet to interact with that. And you wouldn't even know that you're actually interacting with Infinity SVM. You just feel that the entire experience is much faster.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And novel too.
I was doing a couple trades yesterday on chain to buy some stuff. And then every confirmation, like when I click send, it's actually going to take like 15 seconds on average for me to even receive that confirmation. So hopefully, and yeah, this will be a completely different experience when it comes to the end user.
Gotcha. Wow. And before we kind of come to a close on the show, I wanted to do two things. One, ask you if there's any other point here about Infinity VM that I may not have asked about that you think is important for the audience to know. And then, of course, the second would be, I'm going to ask you what you think is interesting in crypto, given the last time we chatted was before this current change in the U.S. administration, and if your view on that has changed. But yeah, let's start with sharing on any points that I may have missed here that would be exciting and important for the community to know.
Yeah, sure. I think one thing that probably I didn't answer, but I did mention it briefly, was when you asked about SDN, multi-executor model, and InfiniBand, the use of those technologies. So I just want to say that in order to make the chain super fast, our chain state doesn't run on a single machine; it runs on multiple machines. And then depending on which sections of the database of the data, not really database, it's a decentralized database of the chain, right? That you touch, your workload would actually get executed on different machines, but they are coherently one state, which means that there's like no, like people talk about sharding, right? Like you select which shard you're going to transact on. But for us, no, this is all transparent to the user, or doing it on a megaliter structure, but it does not necessarily impact the user experience. So the users wouldn't feel anything different beyond, hey, this is a pretty fast chain, beyond, hey, my transaction gets confirmed instantly. So that's the end user experience. And they're enabled by InfiniSV, InfiniBand. InfiniBand is a technology that just connects computers at a very high speed because it has a different protocol. They don't really speak the traditional internet protocols. They have a special IB protocol that would make the communication between different computers much faster with a much lower latency. And latency is very important, especially for cross shard transaction processing from on the megaliter. So that's why these technologies combined would be able to help us with delivering much faster chain.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's awesome. I like that you kept us honest there and making sure we touched on all those points. But yeah, I'll let you continue to answer the second question there.
yeah, so I think you asked something similar during our last podcast about the forecast for the current administration. And now it's like, what's going to be what excites me going forward? I think the crypto space has always been very exciting, whether it's the ETF approval, it's meme coin trades, or it's even US administration changes. Even AI has a part in crypto for some reason, right? Crypto is just able to aggregate the hypes across different sectors. I don't know if oil and gas trades will ever make their way there, but who knows? So crypto is just this a black hole that's absorbing all the energy from different parts of the world and different sectors. So that's always interesting about the interesting part about crypto. Specifically with the Trump administration, I think one big move that he has made was to allow financial institutions to bank crypto companies. And that has a lot of implications that will be able to open up much more liquidity channels to allow the on off ramp cost to be much lower, to allow the operating cost of crypto companies and the compliance cost, hopefully, to be much lower as well. And having a very good rail on ramping and off ramping is very important to make sure that crypto is able to take off. And this is true on the retail side. This is even more true on the institutional side. Institutional money have to go in there. And then part of the institutional money is already on chain, but that's a minor percentage. After Silvergate, and I think there's another bank, went down, it was very difficult for US institutions to operate anything related to crypto. So when Trump, even I operate MPC Vault as well, the amount of US funds actually interacting with DeFi is very small as compared to European funds and funds from other parts of the world. And we know that US is where the capitals congregates. So when the US does allow institutions to participate in DeFi with more permissive laws, with more sort of accommodative banking infrastructure and banking regulations, I think DeFi and the entire blockchain space is going to take off much higher at a much higher speed. And then the second thing is, I think there's also going to be this popularization of crypto. You saw that with the Trump meme coin. And that's actually something that gets everyone to chat about crypto again, right? It was NFT, but it was like a smaller circle thing. But now Trump, the president of the United States himself, issued a meme coin on Solana. Actually, most people don't really know about Solana as much as they know about the Trump coin. But again, tying back to, just really making sure that the developer builds an app that addresses the needs, and therefore the underlying settlement has to be very fast. But the popularization of crypto is really here. And I think several other celebrity names are also going to issue meme coins. So I think that's something, I'm not judging whether it's good or bad from a moral standpoint of view, but this trend itself is going to continue for sure. And that will lead to much more adoption of crypto. And you can almost see the parallel with AI. So the AI started as an esoteric concept only talked about by a small group of experts in universities. And then Tesla commercialized it, self-driving, so more people are talking about it. And then was ChatGPT, which reached, I think it was 100 million users, only under, I think it was 30 days or something. And now you have DeepSeek getting 1 billion downloads in the last, at a lightning speed. And the same thing there is that there's like more popularization of crypto. I think the growth speed of crypto is going to increase, just like the trend that we saw with the adoption of AI.
Yeah, no, these are all excellent points you raise up. I mean, I remember reading maybe in a week or two ago how to buy crypto as a search, and Google has skyrocketed. So we are definitely in the times where crypto is becoming much more mainstream. Really excited for what you're building, and we'll continue to stay supportive. Thanks for coming back on the show, Jason, and we'll see you again soon. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and give us a good 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts so you can get all the latest conversations from the most interesting founders, builders, and investors from across the world. Thanks so much, and have a good one.